Hello and welcome to In the Court of the Wenton Knave. We are doing King Crimson. We are doing King Crimson. King Crimson. King Crimson are being done. And here they are. We're not worthy, but I hope you join me on the journey through the catalogue. Let's enjoy it. Lizard. Controversial track. Controversial album in the catalogue. The band has been blown away. The band were blown away and there's nobody left. It's just Fripp and Peter Sinfield. So they had to look for new people. And obviously there's funny stories about them trying to audition vocalists. May have been for, some of those stories may have been at different points, maybe for Islands or for In the Wake, but there's funny stories about people trying to sing Schizoid Man, and the one guy supposedly fainted from trying to sing it too hard. And there's the funny story about someone singing it really campily. So Fripp asked Gordon Haskell, because he can play bass, he can sing, perfect. Didn't want to do it, doesn't like King Crimson, doesn't have a progressive mindset. You know, he likes traditional music, he likes American music, he likes American black music, he likes soul and all that kind of stuff, and he has that kind of voice. It's a deep voice, soulful voice. He's just not into this stuff at all. I think through desperation Fripp thought, yeah, but it'll work, we can make it work, and it didn't. But ultimately it meant he didn't like the music, he actually hated the music, he didn't understand it. Supposedly the drummer was struggling with the feel they were asking for. He couldn't figure out what they were asking for because Fripp and Sinfield were basically just dictating the way things had to be played. The new band members had no input. This drummer, this Andy McCulloch, was trying to figure out what to do, and Gordon Haskell pointed out to him, he said, well, right, this is the rhythm, just keep that in your head and just play bollocks. And Fripp caught him saying that apparently, but that's all it is to him. He just doesn't get the idea of trying to do something different. And the drummer, Andy McCulloch, this new drummer, some people really like his drumming on this. I think he sounds very wooden and forced, and he's being told to sound like Michael Giles, do a Michael Giles impression, and was apparently very uncomfortable, didn't have any input into the way he should be playing. Ironically, each night he would go home to his flat living with Ian Wallace, complaining about what a miserable time he was having. Some people like his playing though, so We also have Mel Collins, the star of this whole period. Fantastic sax player. Sometimes I think he's better than Ian MacDonald. But he had more of a chance to prove himself in a way because he did some touring, some more extensively recorded touring. He was in a band called Circus. There is a suggestion that Mel Collins' style is more Americanised and Ian MacDonald is more European. I can understand that. Mel Collins does more of the wild stuff than Ian MacDonald, who's kind of more melodic. Peter Sinfield's still around. At some point around this time, he'd negotiated a 60-40 split with Fripp because there were only two people left. And he felt it should have been 50-50. And I think part of the problem was he argued for getting 50-50 and got it. And I don't think Fripp agreed. And I think he's right. I don't think he should have got 50%. If Fripp wrote the whole of this album, Peter Sinfield had a conceptual thing going on and he wrote the lyrics, but I don't think 50%. And obviously that just led to resentment, and that must have contributed to the breakup of their relationship where they fell out, basically. Fripp actually offered joint leadership to Keith Tippett as well, interestingly, because Keith Tippett was back once again, kind of as a session player, and as well as we have Mark Charig and Robin Miller and Nick Evans playing different instruments from Keith Tippett's band, who would return sporadically. I think, but Tippett's band members, the way they were told to play, they were kind of told to improvise just for a couple of bars and then stop, and then they had to check it's in the right style, and then they'd play again. So it was going against the way these things should be recorded, really, and there was no understanding about playing. Ironically, having done that 69 tour, they thought they could sort of forcibly construct it in the studio rather than let musicians play. Now, some would disagree with that because some people, are of the classical composer way of thinking rather than the jazz way of thinking where you play. But I think that stunted the album considerably. I think for that reason this is a bit of a mess of an album. There's some great stuff on there, but overall I think it's a misfire. As an idea, it's something that they tried and didn't work. I think to a certain extent it is King Crimson doing prog, as in kind of doing what the audience would expect of them, almost. What does prog sound like? Well, it sounds like this. And I can imagine Peter Sinfield saying, oh yeah, I'm really into circuses. He feels like a circus man himself. Let's do an album that sounds like a circus with everything going on at once. It is crazy. At least they are moving on. It is different from the first two albums, but I don't think it works. Interestingly, Stephen Wilson disagrees. Stephen Wilson thinks this is a lost masterpiece. Fripp does agree. Fripp thinks it's a bit of a mess, almost unlistenable. I don't think it's unlistenable. There's bits in there I like. I just don't think it works. But like I said, I think they're kind of trying to give the audience what they want. A prog record, which is a terrible idea, obviously. So in that way, very un-Crim. But at this point, I kind of didn't know what Crim was. It was defined, as I said, defined by the 5th album, actually, I think. But a valiant effort, and you can tell, you can hear the hard work that's gone into this, to making it different. Which is also part of the problem of what alienated Gordon Haskell so much, in that supposedly they took hours and hours and hours trying to get a drum sound. The studio they worked in just didn't have a good drum sound, really. That was the real reason. But for Haskell it was ridiculous, because all those classic soul records, they just stuck a microphone there and played and it sounded perfect. That's because they had a good studio, really. That's what it is. The search for new wasn't something he could reflect, he wasn't something he could relate to. And obviously, sadly, the album he was on was the one where it didn't work, which kind of helped. I think Ian MacDonald's arranging skills would have helped tremendously on this. This is Fripp's first full album. All the music is written by him. Peter Sinfield conceptually wrote lyrics, but Fripp wrote all the music. And there's good bits, but it's all disparate, or there's just stuff going on at once, and it's kind of messy. Stephen Wilson's mix does help, and I think that was his idea, that he thought he could prove this is some lost classic. But I still think it's a mess. It might be my least favourite King Crimson album, and but I really like King Crimson, so I still like it, but it's probably my least favourite. In a way, I like the idea, the idea of a circus, so it's all crazy stuff going on at once. But it really is just stuff going on all at once. The cover is not fantastic. It evokes something English. They are keeping to not just a European style of rock, so it's not the Bartok does Hendrix thing, it's specifically English, which is interesting, because I don't think King Crimson were really ever like that, other than here. It's actually specifically English, rather than European. So they finished the album, they started rehearsing for the tour. They, the other band members had been promised, you'll get your own input into this, do your own songs. By the time they get to rehearsals, Gordon Haskell realises he's never going to get his own songs played here. He's got to play all these old songs. He's got to play 21st Century Schizoid Man. And he said, well, can we change the key? Because he's got this really low voice. Schizoid Man needs, your traditional rock voice, which is high and full head voice, and he just can't do that. You can't imagine him doing it. And he said, well, let's change the key. Now, in the modern day, that's what you do, you change the key. But in those days, you just wouldn't do that. This is the key of the song, you've got to sing it. So basically, he left. He left based on that. He said, well, and he feels he could have been talked into returning, actually. But they didn't. They didn't try and talk him into returning. They just said, okay, and they got some press from it, and the band fell apart. Andy McCulloch quit as a result. He thought, well, this is just crazy, I'm out of here. And that was the end of the band. And so there is nothing from Lizard. There is just Lizard, with very little in the way of outtakes or anything like that. I mean, we've got an alternate Lady of the Dancing Water and a studio run-through of Circus. That's all we've got. So I assume there's studio run-throughs of the rest of it, which is much the same. And supposedly, as Haskell left, he claims he was promised he'll still get his money. He was only paid as a session musician rather than a band member. The idea is because he didn't tour, he was never a band member, he was just a session player. That's their argument. But he went through legal proceedings, didn't have the money to do it. And that meant, as I said on the previous album, Cadence and Cascade, on the Frame by Frame box set, was Adrian Belew. And Bolero, the Peacock's Tale, on this album, is actually Tony Levin on bass. Poor Gordon Haskell, who was only in the band briefly, playing a completely different type of music. He's still remembered for being in King Crimson. When he had that big hit album, he sort of beat the system and had a big hit on Radio 2 with How Wonderful You Are. Ex-King Crimson singer has an album out, And apparently people ask him every week, you used to be in King Crimson. So he had an unfair, he was dealt unfairly there, I think. The album opens with Circus. Kind of the best thing on the album. It's in terms of one track that's cohesive. I think that's probably the best thing on the album. The arrangement is insane. It's a complete mess. You've got acoustic guitar going, while there's all this heavy stuff going on, and mellotron, and the stop-start drumming, and the vocals all at once. Stephen Wilson's remix does really help with Circus, and I really like Circus. I prefer the live versions with the next band, though, to be honest. The lyrics. Now, by this time, personally, I think Peter Sinfield changed his approach, maybe, or he'd grown up or something, and I like early Peter Sinfield and I don't like late Peter Sinfield with King Crimson. The lyrics are, I don't know, they're just silly, it's just ridiculous. Maybe the delivery doesn't help because the singer singing them doesn't believe in them either. It's almost kind of like it's built for Boz Burrell, though, strangely. The star of it is Mel Collins, and of course the heavy riff did return many years later. We'll talk about. Track 2 is Indoor Games. I quite like this one. I like the cool horns, I like the less bombastic, less in-your-face vibe. stuff. Not a classic or anything, but I quite like it. Track 3 though is Happy Family. Now there aren't many King Crimson songs I don't like. There's about 3 in total, I think. It's certainly experimental. The lyrics are about the Beatles, I think. I don't think it works. Peter Sinfield is performing on it with the VCS synthesizer. I call it the Atari VCS. The drums are forced. The vocals sound unconvincing. Of course, they sound unconvincing because he wasn't convinced. It's certainly experimental, but it's not a success, which is fair enough, you know. So there you go. I mean, it ends with the famous laughter. Gordon Haskell's laughter, which he was just laughing after the way he performed the last song because he just thought it was ridiculous. And they put all this phasing through his voice and everything, so he's haunted by it. For the rest of his life, that he just laughed ridiculously. Track 4, Lady of the Dancing Water. Really nice ballad, really gentle, probably even more gentle as Cadence and as Cascade. Don't like it quite as much as that, but again, it's perfect for his voice. Whatever he thought of it, I think it's perfect for his voice. Track 5 is the sidelong epic, of course. It's the only time King Crimson did this. Lizard. It's called Lizard, and it's broken up into these different sections. Prince Rupert Awakes is the first one. Now, this features on vocals John Anderson. I think that was a bad idea. I think they obviously decided Gordon Haskell wasn't suited to singing that, and I think that maybe that was a bad idea and he should have sung it. It has a bad effect on the whole vibe of the album, I think. And that quite a bit is ruined by these ridiculous over-the-top Mellotron noises. It's just for the sake of it, just for the sake of making it sound different. Like in Some Kind of Monster by Metallica, where they've played this rubbish riff. It's not a very good riff, and they're having to play it. So the drummer tried to do a stop-start thing, and it just sounds ridiculous. It just sounds like he can't play. It's kind of like that. It just doesn't work. The best bit, there's a funny bit, there's a comedy bit, if you like, in that it's a kind of tongue-in-cheek, epic, lots of strings, and that I think that works really well. And it shows there is a humour to it, which is cool. The next bit though is Bolero, the Peacock's Tale. This is a popular part of the album, and it is really good. It's a bit messy. The musicians were made to improvise just a couple of bars, and then the tape was stopped. So perhaps that wasn't the best way to do it. But still, it's good. If they were left to improvise, I think it would have been better. I think, as I said, there's a classical way and there's a jazz way. Lizard and Islands are kind of those two yin and yangs in a way, I think. In that this is the classical way where the composers are in control. The players have to play what the composers say. In jazz, the composers just give you an idea, and the players are the ones that make it. There's also the Levin version, as I said. Battle of Glass Tears. The vocals are good, that's about it. I think it's a bit of a messy thing. Skirmish. It's awkward generic crim, I think. It's an awkward riff, But then we have Lament. Not that Lament, this is Prince Rupert's Lament. Fantastic, classic for it, using his sustain for Battlefield. And in a way that ends Lizard, but actually we have Big Top as well, which ties it all together as a circus. The sound of the circus and all that stuff. I do like it. Maybe you could argue that that's a bit of a cheap shot, maybe, but it hangs the album together and it makes it okay. But not their best album for me. Controversial. See you next week for Islands.